Okay, we're continuing with this book here, The Hidden History of Nutrition, Health, and Science by me, Pete Rogers. We're talking right now, this section about iron. Randall Laufer, PhD from Harvard, biochemist, he wrote this book, Iron in Your Heart. And there's a lot of interesting things, like why do women live longer than men? And, the first thought is because they're not married to women, okay? But the second thought is, men die earlier from heart attacks. Well, why do men die earlier from heart attacks? Because women menstruate. When a woman menstruates, that's like a therapeutic phlebotomy. People make fun of the old timers, 1700s, 1800s for bleeding people, but there is a benefit to it. If the person's hemoglobin is high, if they have high-fat diets where they get blood sludge, thickening of the blood, increased blood viscosity, then they're more predisposed to hypertension as well as tissue hypoxia, lack of oxygen delivery. Think about it. Why do you have a blood pressure? To pump blood to the top of your brain, the cerebral cortex. Normal blood's thin like water. If you eat a high-fat meal, your blood becomes thick because you get blood sludge. It sticks the red blood cells together, overcomes the zeta potential. Now you're pumping thick blood up to the brain, okay? If you bleed the patient, the blood gets a little thinner because you lower the hematocrit, meaning the percentage of red blood cells in the blood. The main variable in blood viscosity is how high the hematocrit is. So lowering the hematocrit is a way to lower blood viscosity, thus lower blood pressure, and increase tissue oxygen delivery if it was suboptimal. If you're eating a low-fat vegan diet, then your hemoglobin's fine where it's at. That's actually a much smarter thing to do than just donate blood. Donate blood can be helpful if you have other problems like you're iron overloaded with hemochromatosis. Okay. And he goes through a lot of the reasons why being iron overloaded is a major problem. Most men in a Western society are iron overloaded by their 20s because they don't menstruate and they eat a lot of meat and the processed foods fortified with iron. Women tend to become iron overloaded, around 55, let's say average menopause in around 50, early 50s. And then a couple years after that, they gradually become iron overloaded. All right, and now I'm going to explain why iron overload is such a bad thing here. Okay, that book, by the way, is really good. Laufer is a really clever guy. Okay, here's another book on iron that's quite good by Jim Moon, PhD. And he calls iron is the most toxic metal. And he talks about what a disaster it is to fortify food with iron. People aren't dying from deficiency diseases. They're dying from overload diseases because you're going to get ferrous redox cycling. I'll show you a picture of it. And he goes through lots and lots of diseases that are dramatically made worse. It's good to keep your serum ferritin between about 30 to 80. You don't want it below 30 because then you'll be predisposed to restless leg syndrome. This is just a graph showing you how men become iron overloaded in their 20s. Women, after menopause in their 50s start becoming iron overloaded. Iron is a transitional metal, meaning it has a variable valence, a variable charge on it. And the most common charges on it are Fe2 plus and Fe3 plus. Okay, so here it is in the transitional metals, the ones with variable valence. And now here's the big problem. Here's the one you want to remember. You can hit the print screen button on your computer to save this slide. This is a valuable slide. So here's Fe3 plus, Fe2 plus. So ferrous means like Latin for rust, okay? And that's the symbol, chemical symbol for iron. And it's easy to remember Fe for ferrous for iron and Fe for Fenton, the Fenton reaction. So with the Fenton reaction, when you got iron undergoing redox cycling between Fe2 plus, Fe3 plus, Fe2 plus, Fe3 plus, it's giving off electrons. And it can convert hydrogen peroxide into hydroxyl radicals. Hydroxyl radicals are extremely reactive. They'll react immediately with whatever's around them and damage it. And they can initiate free radical cascading chain reactions and do a tremendous amount of damage, including to membranes, through lipid peroxidation. So iron is dangerous. This Eugene Weinberg, PhD, iron researcher, has a great quote. He said, iron is like fire. In your fireplace and your stove, it's something helpful. Fireplace, it warms your house. Stove, it cooks your food. But you don't want fire anywhere else in your house. It'll burn the place down. And that's what iron does. Normally, you store it in your blood on a binding protein called transferrin that travels it around, like a little kayak, a two-person kayak, just 2 units of iron transported around. But then intracellular, you got ferritin, which will store 4,500 molecules of iron. But once you overwhelm that capacity, you get free iron in your blood, free iron in your mitochondria. So the question arises, why does the body store so much iron? Well, our ancestors were worried about, being clawed or bitten by a predator and they could bleed to death. So they wanted iron stores in their body to quickly replenish their hemoglobin in the event of massive bleeding. In addition, we often use iron at enzyme active sites because this ability to hand off electrons is very useful for lowering the active state of a chemical reaction. Okay. the transition state of a chemical reaction. It's also useful in hemoglobin, of course, for handing off oxygens. Okay, it's also useful in the electron transport chain for handing down electrons, passing them down the chain like a fireman bucket brigade on the intermitochondrial membrane electron transport chain. Okay, so that's it, ferrous redox lichen. The other thing it does is it causes amyloid transformation of red blood cells, meaning that it distorts the shape of, amyloid transformation of fibrinogen, the clotting protein. So it's a fibrinogen. I've given previous lectures on this in the context of leaky gut. The bacterial endotoxins LPS and LTA will also cause amyloid transformation of fibrinogen. An amyloid transformation means that the secondary protein structure of fibrinogen is a clotting protein, will change from being alpha helix like a cylinder or like a slinky to being flat like beta pleated sheet. Then they'll stack up and they'll bond with themselves through hydrogen bonds intermolecular between the different molecules of fibrinogen. Well, the larger the molecular weight of a molecule in aqueous solution, the more likely it is to precipitate. To precipitate means to clot. Aqueous solution is the plasma of blood. So you form blood clots, and those are what's called amyloid clotting, all right? And iron does that. So iron overload does that, and leaky gut does that from bacterial endotoxins. And the modern average chump in a Western society is iron overloaded and has leaky gut. So they get all this extra clotting. Viral infections can do the same thing. Now you form these amyloid clots. They're typically 2 to 200 microns in size. They travel around the body, plugging up arteries in your brain, make you stupid, plugging up arteries in your heart, causing atrial fibrillation, eventually congestive heart failure. So how do you stop all this? Avoid, eating red meat. Avoid eating, foods fortified with iron, and eat plenty of fiber from plant foods so you don't get leaky gut. And then you can prevent all this stuff. I think that's about it. Let's see if I got maybe one more thing on this. Okay, that's it for iron. And I don't like to donate big blood at a time because I worry about getting dizzy. I got dizzy one time when I did that, so I don't like that. It was my own fault too. I didn't hydrate. But what I recommend is whenever I have to go for a blood test, I just have them pull off a couple extra tubes. And I use that to get my serum ferritin down. It was originally like around 290 or something, which is normal range, but I knew that was higher than I wanted it to be. And that was because when I was a kid, I used to think it was cool to eat Popeye, be like Popeye, have high iron from eating the Raisin Bran with all the extra iron, fortified with iron. I didn't learn until I was older that that's a stupid thing to do. And so I had to get my iron levels. My most recent one was like 110, just from taking off a couple extra tubes every time I go for a blood draw. Anyways, I hope you found this helpful.